I guess the first thing I wanted to say was a quote from an Irish artist, a painter, William Crozier, and he said about his work that the landscape was not the subject, but that the landscape was the vehicle through which to express something that is intangible. So meaning that it doesn't have form, what it is that you're trying to express. Maybe something like memory or loss. So I use the landscape in my work as this vehicle to express something intangible. I'm fascinated by many elements of Simone de Beauvoir's work. And I think it brought me back to my early thesis. I say early because that was many years ago, in the mid-90s when I first graduated, and I did a degree in sculpture. And then I moved on and did a master's in interaction design. But my early thesis, I was interested in feminist ideas and the landscape. And I think through this residency, my work has come full circle because I wouldn't say I separated from that feminist work, but I began to work more in the landscape. And by reading Simone de Beauvoir, I'm very interested in, how she spoke about, the early human settlements and how humans went from a nomadic life, nomadic life to a settled life in agriculture. And the question, where did woman lose her power along the way, and why did she lose her power? And also I think the most abiding thing for me in this work, which again brought me back to the kind of mid-90s in my first thesis, I'm very interested in how women have not really been represented in history. History is man's story. Man have made law, psychology, religion, everything, and woman has been very underrepresented. So where does all this lead to, and what am I getting to? So for this piece, I decided to take a very dystopian theme, so very kind of futuristic. And that is so relevant today, because every day we turn on the news and we're reading something about the climate, about the landscape. We are in trouble. It is a disaster. There is no doubt about it. And to me, when I was in Ireland and I came back from the residency and I was reading Simone de Beauvoir, and I was saying, well, how is her work relevant to me today? And I had a particular moment, and I was driving in the car with my 11-year-old daughter, and we were driving through the countryside, beautiful green countryside, and I was thinking about Simone de Beauvoir, and I said, well, how is it relevant? And I thought, well, who owns the landscape? Who controls it? And I realized it's men again. It's all a patriarchal discourse. I come from a town. I don't come from a farming background, but I don't know if you know anything about Ireland, but one of the things you will know is it's very green and it's very agricultural, and the land is very important. So I said to myself, who controls the land? And of course it has always been the son who inherits the land. And I was driving, and then there was a truck in front of me, and I realized that the truck were the men who installed all the power and the electricity. And I said to my daughter, it's all men in the truck. And she's going, oh, Simone de Beauvoir, here we go again. So I thought about that, and so I wanted to make some sort of a dystopian film where I could, so we're at the very end of the film here. It's a 12-minute piece, but in the very beginning I filmed in a huge power plant, which I think was one of the largest power plants of its kind in Europe, and it's now being decommissioned, and it's a terrible, because the coal is coming from Colombia, and it's not really very, what would you say, it's the old way, it's very dirty power. And so I was very surprised they allowed me to film there, and their first question was, well, are you going to say something bad about us? And I said, no, I'm just making a film, and so you pretend you're taking nice photographs or whatever. So I created in the beginning almost like a strike, so something has happened to the planet maybe, and I wanted to create two characters, and one character is this character, and we cannot really recognize her, and her gender is not very clear in the beginning, but she's following a younger person who's clearly a woman. She's wearing the feminine clothes, she's wearing a fur coat, and the younger woman is under surveillance. You see her on a screen all the time. So the idea was that maybe possibly this is a visitor to our planet, or we don't know, where does she come from? And so if we had a catastrophe, and if humanity was wiped out, if there were very few people left, what would we find on Earth in the history? We would find man's history. Where would we find a record of woman? Like, for example, I was in Ljubljana a few days ago and I did a walking tour, and there was a beautiful church with a bronze door, and all the generations of the important men were cast in the door. There was one woman. She was with the child down here somewhere, and we had all these men in the door. So this is a character, and she's taking on then this kind of female form, and she's asking, what is it? So she's taking on the clothes of femininity. I don't like to explain it too much, because you might say, oh, I thought it was something different, and maybe you're right, because there's many readings and everything.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.